Hello, and welcome to another episode of Brandon's Face, the podcast about a playlist, where today we will not be breaking down our playlist. We'll be doing our end of the year awards. So, songs of the year in every category, albums of the year in every category. Pretty much the show that our whole entire year builds towards. Brandon, are you excited for this?
My man, these were some hard decisions.
I know. So you're typically not like an R&B guy. Did you find it hard to like find five candidates for R&B?
I did. But here's what I did. I kind of went through my notes for the year, and I think if R&B wasn't a category, I think it would have been not as fun because with R&B being a category and me needing to go through and read some of my notes, I got to kind of go through all of my notes and reread them and look through them because and we'll get into my strategy for picking some of these. But I probably wouldn't have done as much reading through my notes as I did for this show. So I'm kind of glad that R&B was a category because it kind of made me read through some of my notes, and I think you're going to be a little surprised actually.
I'm excited. I found the selection process to be grueling, and at times you have to remind yourself that it's just an arbitrary thing, but it's really fun at the end of the year to go back and revisit some of these because some records I didn't remember being great turned out to be really good, and I'm sure there's honorable mentions where we'll talk about that didn't make the cut. And then there's records that I kind of like burned into the ground and forgot how good they are because I just played the shit out of them right when they came out. So going back after like a few months, more or less not listening to so much music every day, was kind of a fun, refreshing experience. And I feel like getting to do these lists at the end of every year gets me excited for the next year. Like I'm already pumped, like, oh shit, is it going to be Kendrick? Is it going to be Freddie? Is it going to be Pusha T? It's always fun. I find the discussion around these things equally as captivating as the lists themselves. I don't know about you.
Yeah, I absolutely agree. And what I have kind of admired about you, John, is that you've been doing this every year without us doing this podcast.
Yes.
You've been posting these, and every year you would post one, and it got me thinking. And I never used to take notes on stuff like this, and this year's been really rewarding, kind of listening to music and writing down my thoughts on it, and kind of made me realize how much I like writing about music and also talking about it, which I do to everybody regardless of whether or not they want to listen. And I think you made a good point, John. It's everything is arbitrary. These lists are subject to change at literally any time, and depending on who I talk to.
Yeah, they might change while we're talking. Who knows?
Exactly. So I'm excited. Let's get into it, my man.
All right, man. Well, let's start with the songs category. We'll build up to albums. And we're going to do the five main categories: electronic slash dance, hip hop slash rap, pop, R&B, and rock. And I know like some of these can be, you can argue certain bands that are pop. Pop is going to be an interesting genre, and I'll elaborate more on that when we get to it. But let's get into the first list, which is electronic slash dance. So, Brandon, we'll go from 5 to 1, assuming you ranked yours in some order.
I did.
What is your number 5 pick for electronic slash dance song of the year?
So my number 5 pick, I'll tell you in just a second. What I did is I really like electronic music because it's one of those genres where there's a lot of singles and not a lot of albums. There's way more singles in the electronic realm than there are albums, and some of my top 5 came from albums, and some of them didn't. So my number 5 was "On My Knees" by Refuse to Soul.
Ooh, fantastic song. Great song. Revisited that one as well, and it is fantastic. Definitely an honorable mention for me. That's interesting that you say that because looking at my list, all of my songs came from albums. But I get totally what you're saying because there is a lot of just one-offs in that industry, and we've talked endlessly throughout this year about how like insane it was to get this many electronic full-length records.
Right.
I don't know if we'll ever see this kind of output again. I know next year we're already looking at Swedish House, but we'll see how many big artists release albums next year in this genre. So at number five, I have Boys Noise featuring Abra Affection, which
Great
was, I
song.
believe, my favorite song when it came out. And revisiting this album in general for this end of the year list, choosing between this song and Polarity on the album was very, very hard, but
I
my
know.
R&B roots took over it, so I went with Affection. I love that song so
It's a good
much.
song. It's a good song. Great album too.
Oh, fantastic. All right, so let's move on to your number four pick. What do you got?
My number four was a song called "Clear" by Colsh.
Ooh, man, Colsh is great. You made me a big fan of Colsh throughout the year by endlessly dropping, I think mostly remixes of his, but a few originals, and that one was incredible. He's such a good artist, and I believe we're going to be reviewing a little more of his music this upcoming month.
I think so. I think we've got
Yeah.
some Colsh on here, and it's funny, man. Colsh released an album this year that I didn't really like. It was kind of sedated for what I like from him, and I will say though that the singles and the remixes he put out this year just blew me away. And revisiting all of his singles from this year was honestly kind of exhilarating. Like he puts out some crazy music, man.
Yeah, he's a very talented producer and very underrated and kind of one of the lesser known ones, I'd say, at least in this state. So I'm glad to see him still putting out super high quality stuff. He made me a fan, and I'm very excited to hear what's next from him.
Yeah, I got to see him in a little small little club in Hollywood, so I doubt we'll ever. I doubt. I hope he
It's the
still plays
best way
small
to see an
venues.
artist like that.
Yes, I've also seen Feed Me at that same club, but that was a little different of a show.
As all Feed Me shows are. So my number four pick, I have SG Lewis, One More featuring Nile Rodgers. This was an album that really, really took me by surprise when it came out and has kind of stayed in my rotation all year. But this song in particular is one that I've just found I never get tired of it really. Like it comes on my rotation constantly, at least once a day, if not every other day. And I always look forward to it. It's great. Nile Rodgers is fantastic on this song on the vocals. And again, like the Boys Noise album, choosing one song off of this album was very, very hard because it has Chemicals, it has Feed the Fire, a lot of great, great
Oh,
songs. But
Chemicals is such a good song. Yeah,
in the end, this is the song that made me see him on a different level as an artist.
nice. Yeah. I like to say I have a decent vinyl collection, and picking from the collection sometimes is hard when you're not really sure what you're in the mood for. What's funny
Mm-hmm.
is that that album, SG Lewis Times, fits literally every mood.
Yeah.
So we've been throwing that on quite a bit.
That's fantastic. I love it. All right, moving on to your number three pick. What do you got?
My number three, and it was fun to go through this person's singles too, is a song called Y2K2K by Loon.
Ooh, this is Lights alias, right?
Yep. Yep.
Okay, and your sister Nikki suggested this to us,
Yep.
correct?
Shout out to Nikki.
Shout out
She
Nikki.
she definitely suggested this. She's been a big Lights fan for a while, and we got to see Lights together at Coachella. I don't know what year it was, 2015 or 2016 or something like that. And
I
uh,
would say this song getting number three on your list is probably a bigger accomplishment to her than playing Coachella. So,
I mean, one
congrats.
as one does. No, it was a good song, and going through her singles again, because it's funny, man. When I sat down, and electronic dance was really the only category that really did this to me. It got me really excited to go through all of the singles, and I went through all the Tin Liquor stuff, and I went through all of the one offs, and Loon was one of those artists where I was like, okay, well, I discovered her this year, and really I kept going back to it, and it's got that perfect amount of heavy for me, and this is a good song.
Yeah, fantastic. That was, I think, my favorite Loon song of the songs you've added this year so far. So great
Yeah,
pick. I'm
cool.
all on board.
Thanks, man.
Number three for me, I have Flight Facilities Forever. And what will be a common thread on a lot of these is very hard to select. This is another album with like Lights Up and Heavy. All these songs are fantastic and you really can't go wrong. But I feel like Forever not just encapsulates the album best because it's the title track, but it really encapsulates where their sound is at right now best. And I just fucking love this song. We will be talking about this album a little later. Spoiler alert. Fantastic to see Flight Facilities back after so fucking long. It felt like a way, even though they've been dropping singles for a few years. Any thoughts on this one?
Oh man, we're gonna talk about Flight Facilities later, definitely. But yeah, it's funny, man. Putting on this album and sitting with my wife and just kind of listening as I was going through this list. I just kind of put this album on, and every song, every other song, maybe she was like, "Who's this again?" And I was like, "This is still Flight Facilities." She was like, "Fuck, this whole album is just banger after banger after banger," and just it's very difficult to choose one. I happened to choose one for my number two, which is "The Ghost" by Flight Facilities.
Oh my God, incredible. I fucking love that. I forgot that you were so big on that song when it came out.
I mean the 303 that they use in that song is such an iconic instrument for me, and hearing it come out in that way, and hearing them kind of fuck with the pitch just perfectly is just it's a good song, man. It's a great album,
and
but I had to go with what my gut said. And well, I really liked Lights Up, don't get me wrong, and Forever, and basically all of them. I couldn't. I kept going back to this song.
yeah, it's so different from anything that they've ever really done. And I think it's a chance that worked out in the end. Not all risks kind of pay off this way. And this one was the right thing at the right time for this artist, and they fucking crushed it. This whole album is fantastic. I'm excited to get into that a little bit later.
Yeah.
Perfect segue, by the way. Respect. So
I mean, you set it up, man. I just knock them down. You know what I'm saying?
speaking of flights being in the sky, my number two is "Look at the Sky" by Porter Robinson. Just fucking with you. But yeah, my number two is "Look at the Sky" by Porter Robinson. I felt like this one was going to be an easy number one. I will get into the one that dethroned it in a second, but this was a very anticipated song going into this year. He played it on one of his online live streams last summer, and I think this was like the fourth single to drop from the album, and it wasn't until earlier this year, January, I think, sometime, maybe March. You and I praised the song, praised the album. We'll talk about it more a little bit later. This was another album that I feel like, even just going through the singles and not personal favorites, to choose between "Look at the Sky," Something Comforting, Musician, like this was another very, very difficult choice. But I feel like "Look at the Sky" is probably the highlight of the album if you have to pick one.
It is peak Porter.
Yeah. Yes. This is the sad machine of the album. It is what best represents where he's at and the journey the album will take you on in kind of one condensed version of it.
I think it's a great amalgam of everything he's done. I will never forget hearing Flicker on SoundCloud the day he released it, because that's how people used to release music. And hearing how different that was from his Spitfire EP, and still getting so excited for it, listening to "Look at the Sky" kind of brought me back, I guess, sonically to how I felt during that SoundCloud listen. And yeah, man, that's why it's my number one.
Ooh, okay. I love it.
Yeah, man.
I'm surprised. I knew you were a big fan, but for some reason I was like, I wonder if he's gonna pick like a deeper cut than that. But I'm glad we're on the same page. Like you can't hate on perfection just because you play it out to yourself a little bit.
Exactly. And it's funny. We'll get into it a little later, but my Spotify numbers are skewed. I know that you probably didn't see Porter come up on my Spotify list that I sent you, but that's because I don't listen to it on Spotify. I bought the vinyl and it just sounds so crisp there, and that's where I listen to it. This is it's my electronic dance song of the year for sure. It just has every element in it, and it I don't
It's a
really care if
perfect
it's
song.
I don't care if it's too mainstream at this point. Let's
Who
go.
gives a shit?
Porter
No, it's a
Robinson
perfect song.
got it. And
Yeah,
he did it, man. Honestly, choosing between The Ghost and Look at the Sky, I had to really determine which one I liked more, and that decision was hard, bro. Like,
yeah. Two very different songs for very different reasons, but I get why you picked this. I feel like The Ghost is a great song that you can revisit and still be impressed with. And but this one is one of those like masterpiece ones, and I think you made the right choice in the end.
well, thanks,
Uh,
man. Now tell me yours.
Before I do, really quick, to what you were saying earlier about how I've been making these lists for years before anybody was even asking me to. A lot of that came from like, man, Spotify never really encapsulates what I think of when I look back at my year. So I feel like revisiting these things yourself and not just relying on whatever algorithm they're using to tell you what your favorite stuff is, because there's all sorts of inconsistencies in that, and a lot of their play counts I found were off. Like some of the songs that said I listened to the most, I'm like, oh, I listened to it way more than that. like, so yeah, these things are just fun. If you're listening to this, people, just make a list. It's fucking fun. Make your favorite whatever TV shows of the year, movies of the year. Put it online. Talk about it. It's fun.
You know, I to that point, John, I think making your own decision is kind of almost like a lost art in some ways nowadays. I think we all rely on the comment sections on social media to tell us what's good, what's not, and man, I mean, I think that this was a lot of fun to do.
Yeah, yeah, and I think next year when we do this, hopefully we have a nice little base of listeners, and we'll send out the template and everyone can do it with us. And
Yeah,
we'll do we'll pull the responses and see what the most popular picks are.
I like
Um,
that.
but yeah, without further ado, my number one, a group or artist, I think it's two guys, I had no idea existed before this year that put out a song that has just blown me away with its quality, and that's Keep Moving by Jungle. Uh, if I downloaded this song on LimeWire and it said new Daft Punk song, I would 1,000% believe it. New Justice song, like it's the fact that it sounds as good as that is just it. I get that Look at the Sky is a masterpiece in its own way, and it probably from an originality standpoint is the more original song, but give me this fucking French house music all day when it's done this well. This is another reason I'm like a big Sebastian fan as well. He's very underrated, but when he locks into this type of sound, he just fucking kills it. Jungle, we'll talk about them a little more later, but like not only do they write and record their own music, they fucking do the vocals on it. Like it's an impressive feat, and I feel like this is like Look at the Sky, like Forever. These are just all perfect songs. I could not possibly, there's no rating of these that you could get wrong, like if you like one or over the other, but they're all, I think, objectively perfect. What about you? Any thoughts on Jungle, Keep Moving?
Well, I listened to that. I listened to the album today. What is it, Love in Stereo? And
Yes.
listened to it earlier today, and it's a fantastic album. I can see why it's your number one choice, because it is. You're right. They kind of took me by surprise. They took us by surprise. They kind of took like the world by surprise. Man, this shit was awesome. I appreciate your comparison to you liking Jungle for the same reasons you like Sebastian, not only because they're French, but because of kind of the innovativeness of their tones. And
Yeah.
I really appreciate that, because you introduced me to Sebastian, and I'll never forget the day you were like, just listen to this album, and I put it on, and it's kind of rare where I put an album on and then it ends and then I need to listen to it all the way through immediately again. And it was just kind of that beautiful moment where I was like, okay, well, I guess I'm starting this over, you know?
Yeah, that was wow. The early seeds of Brandon's face. That was
Right.
so long ago. That was probably 2019.
I think so.
Yeah, fantastic. We'll talk about Jungle more, but let's keep this moving. Let's move on to our hip hop / rap songs of the year. What do you got at number 5, Brandon?
Number 5, I think every day I wake up and throw a gang sign. It's
Oh,
it's my number 5 song, man. I kept going back to that song, man. Freddie Gibbs, Schoolboy Q, Gang Signs kills it. They get it. They
my
understand it. It fucking I get it.
yes, my Spotify top played song of the year actually it was that.
No way.
Yes, I wish you would have done this at 4 because I could have done a much cleaner segue, but it's all right. Actually, 3. I'm really bad with segues. All right,
I
so
believe in you, John.
thank you. We'll be talking about Freddie more shortly. At number 5, which is actually one I moved down a notch right before starting this recording, just because another song has dethroned it after I've given it about 25 listens in the past week. But at number 5, we have Conway the Machine, Scatterbrain featuring Ludacris and Jid. I feel like this would have been number 1 or 2 had Ludacris not been on it. I feel like he kind of bogs the end of the song down. But when Conway and Jid are just going back and forth, that is as close to perfection as you get.
I will
Any
again
thoughts?
disagree with you on Ludacris, but I guess I have to respect it.
It's a terrible verse. You so thirsty, you freaking poison. It's awful. It's just like dad bars. Like he's not a bad rapper. He has some legendary albums, but that one ain't it.
Okay.
Theater of the Mind Ludacris was like my last favorite album of his. Since then, it's been post Justin Bieber Baby Money. I don't think he cares what anybody thinks of him. So we'll leave him to that. But well, let's move on to number 4. What do you got at number 4?
Number 4, I have a song called Needs by Coda the Friend.
Coda. I had a feeling he would be popping up on your list maybe a few times this recording.
Perhaps.
So what made you pick Needs over everything else?
It just resonated with me, man. The lyrics in that song just really hit me at the exact right time that I needed to hear him say these words, and it's a beautiful song, man. As are most of his songs, but I think I needed to hear Needs, and I think I needed to hear it at the exact time he released it, and so every time I listen to it, it's just amazing.
Yeah, he's one of those guys that makes you feel rich even if you're broke when you listen to him. And it's not that he's rapping about money. He just makes you feel good. There's something about Coda's music that just has this energy to it that just radiates endlessly. And he is one of the most talented dudes that I'd never heard of before we started doing this. And since then, I've heard probably 60 Coda the Friend songs, and all of them are very similar, but all of them are great. I'm a big fan of his now.
I think we're all rich in spirit when we listen to some Coda.
Yes, as we should be.
What you got at number 4, John?
Number 4. So I have one we have yet to talk about, and that's Rick Ross Rapper Estates featuring Benny the Butcher, off Rick Ross's latest album, which I'll reserve my thoughts on the album, but I will talk about this song a little bit. Have you had a chance to listen to it?
Yes, a number of times.
It sounds like Benny was waiting for this his whole entire career. Jesus, man. Like, I think
gets it, man.
Yeah. On Twitter prior to this album's release, there was a lot of talk when he released the track list, and everyone was looking forward to one song. So this one, it had anticipation in a way that I don't think a lot of other songs on the album did. And goddamn, it's easily the best song on the album, the best instrumental on the album, and the best rhymes on the album. It's just two of the best right now doing exactly what they do. And I felt like it's kind of hard not to talk about the Rick Ross album, but I feel like Benny really did a great job bringing the best out of him in a way that we don't really hear very often.
I can dig that. You made me this year a fan of Benny the Butcher, and I think we're going to talk about Benny a little later.
Awesome. All right, what do you got at number 3?
Number 3, I have man, and it was tough. It was tough making this decision from this album too, but it was Moments by Nas.
Ooh, yeah, that album. I'll just spoil now that I don't have any Nas on my top 5 of the songs, but that album, when I was revisiting it, my favorite songs on it, I think, are Rare, Moments, and No Phony Love. and the Lauryn Hill one. There's just so many good songs on that
It was
album.
for me. It was between Moments and Rare, and
Yeah,
I listened to both
Rare
of them
is
back to back to back to back, and I was like, it's got to be Moments.
yeah, Rare is a rap showcase, but I think Moments is definitely more of You're in My Vibe, especially lyrically.
Yep.
Yeah, and the production on it's a little bit lighter, a little bit glossier. I love Moments. That's a great one. Great pick.
Yeah, man. What was your number three?
So my number three was Freddie Gibbs, Gang Signs, featuring Schoolboy Q. Again, fantastic song. I echo
Just
everything you just
incredible.
said about it. Perfect, easily my most anticipated album of next year right now.
This year?
Okay.
Did you say next year? Is it this year?
So let's talk about that really quick. So there's been a lot of like, don't make those end of the year list tweets and rumors floating around the interwebs the past few weeks. Some from Freddie, most recently from The Alchemist. That one turned out Alchemist is doing another album with another guy. He did an album earlier this year with the guy called with a rapper named Boldy James, who's kind of like a Larry June type, I guess, if I had to do a comparison.
Okay.
And it was called Bo Jackson. It was received pretty well. We didn't review it. It kind of flew under my radar at the time, but they're doing, I think, a part 2 to that. So that's what's coming out possibly tonight as we're recording this on Thursday. So who knows, man? But as I've told you, Freddie Gibbs does not give a shit about our lists or about when we think is logical to drop an album. And he doesn't need to. But yeah, fantastic song. It was very hard to pick, and you'll see why as we get into the next few picks. But what do you got at number 2?
Oh man, my number two and my number one were hard to choose from, and it's funny as I was making this list, I kind of switched them like 3 or 4 times. I think they're kind of both on the same level. It's The Shining by Vince Staples.
Oof. Interesting pick. Wow. Okay. So that's a deep cut. I was not expecting that. I was expecting potentially some Vince Staples, but not The Shining. What made you pick The Shining?
The Shining just kind of resonated with me, man. Looking over my notes, and rereading the notes and re-listening to the album for the upteenth time this year. It's a deep cut, but I think it's one of those songs that make this album as good as it is. And it's kind of, I think it's what is it? I think it's track 6 out of 7 or maybe 5 out of 7, and it's kind of winding down through that story he's telling. And I don't know, man, it just hit me right. So
yeah, that album.
It was my standout when we reviewed it.
Yeah, I do remember you really liking that one. That album is fantastic and is really getting some good recognition on a lot of publications' end of the year lists, and I'm happy that he is. Every time one of them like posts that list, he just tweets stream Vince Staples. So I guess that's what he would want us to say. So people go stream Vince Staples. We'll move on to my number 2, which is Freddie Gibbs, Big Boss Rabbit.
Oh, right. Great song, man.
Yeah. I try to avoid too much weird, like, I try to limit things to one song per artist for the sake of variety, but I'm not going to deny Freddie when he's just at this level operating like this. It was tough. I feel like Gang Signs is a better song, but some of the rhymes in Big Boss Rabbit just make me laugh and keep me coming back. And I really like the speed he's rapping at in that one. So that's why I picked that one over Gang Signs. But
it's a good song.
You really
man.
Can't go wrong. Yeah,
it's a good song, man. I think Gang Signs just got it a little bit more for me, but I can totally understand that. And fuck variety, bro. You like what you like, man. If you had told me in 2013 that I had to choose between To the Stars by Feed Me and One Click Headshot by Feed Me, I would have told you go fuck yourself. So
thank you. I appreciate it. I needed that.
I mean, that's just kind of real, man. You know?
No, you're right. And I don't shy away from it, as you'll see shortly. But what do you got at number 1?
All right. I think I told you I was going to surprise you a little bit, right?
Yeah.
And you noticed that The Shining was a little bit of a deep cut. I think I got the deepest of the deep cuts on my...
I told you Linkin Park does not count as rap.
In the end, it doesn't really matter. But my number 1 is Wilshire by Tyler, the Creator.
Oof.
You get Tyler the Creator rapping for 8 minutes and 23 seconds, and I'm not even sure that I don't even think that there's a chorus on this song.
No.
It is just him pouring his heart out onto what I'm assuming is a pen and paper as he writes, and just speaking from his fucking heart about everything that you could. It is the pinnacle of rap in 2021. Wilshire, Tyler the Creator. Quote me on that.
Yeah, it's about love, loss, heartbreak, life, money, success, failure, fear, you know, just a broad spectrum of things we can all relate to, even though he's doing it on a level none of us can relate to. He is truly a one of one right now. That song is one of the best ones on the album. It kind of works as a stream of consciousness when you listen to it more than anything. If you go back and listen to, what was that song on the end of Blonde by Frank Ocean, Future of Free, I think, is very similar to that. It's just them kind of going through all the thoughts in their head just to a random beat, and it turns into just art over time. When it starts, you're like, this is kind of weird, but sometimes that's just when the best ideas arise. You can't force them. They have to come organically, and they have to come in that stream of consciousness. And I feel like that song is, we really caught him like in that right headspace.
Yep.
Great pick. Great pick.
Thanks, man. Yeah, I have you ever heard? I mean, clearly you have, but if any of our listeners have not heard Tyler the Creator talking to people off the mic and just talking, Wilshire is, in my opinion, how he spills his heart out to even some of the most random people.
Yeah.
And this is, I don't know, it's pinnacle of Tyler the Creator. It's pinnacle of rap this year. And I am so excited to hear what your number one is, sir.
My number one is Freddie Gibbs' Black Illuminati featuring Jadakiss. Freddie Gibbs released 3 singles this year, and without a doubt, they are my top 3 singles in the genre.
That's such a good song, man. I kept going back to that too. That's a good song, man. Jadakiss kills it.
Yeah, Freddie he's had a good revival this year. Freddie is killing it. The reason I picked this one over Gang Signs and Big Boss Rabbit, it's no better lyrically. It's on the same exact level, which is perfect. It's the instrumental. Just, this was my exact vibe that I like. It's that slowed down, got a little dark jazz influence or something in there. I fucking love it. Easy number one pick for me.
Dark jazz trap. Great pick, man.
Yes.
Great pick, man. Yeah.
Thank you.
That song is great. That song is great. Good shit.
Yes. Let's change the station from dark jazz rap to some light pop. So I guess pop was an interesting category, and there's a variety of artists that you could say fit in the genre that could easily fit in other genres. And there's kind of, I feel like you and I should preface this by saying we are not doing popularity by definition. We're doing popularity by genre. If we were going popularity by definition, this list would be between Olivia Rodrigo, Billie Eilish, Adele. Not a lot of artists that we like listen to. Not saying any of them can't make this list, but we're talking about a kind of a broader selection for pop. So I think that'll kind of take shape as our lists do. But what do you got at number 5?
So I'm kind of glad you prefaced this category with that. And that's kind of how I went into both my song choices and my album choices for pop. And I may have a controversial pick for number 5, because does this artist fit within pop or another genre? And Am I Dreaming by Lil Nas X is my number 5.
That is totally within the realm of pop, and I was going to talk about that when we get to albums a little bit. Not in my top 5 pop albums personally, but easily one of the most popular and influential albums in our country this year. It's been anchored by the 2 massive singles, Montero, Call Me By Your Name, and Industry Baby, and is now starting to get that bleed over success into some of the deeper cuts that I've heard on the radio. He kind of took some interesting chances on that album, but I feel like you picking that song says so much like about you that you don't really give a shit that his like most anthemic pop songs, like I like how you kind of said earlier, like pick what you fucking like, not what the world likes. So that's a great pick. Is there any specific reason that song hit you better than the rest?
You know, man, it was my standout when we listened to the album. Well, it was between that one and I think it was "Call Me by Your Name," and
Mhm.
yeah, man, it just there's in my opinion, there are certain times when artists on albums shine, and I'm assuming I'm assuming that you assume that you're gonna get a lot of deep cuts from me, and you probably will during this album of the year list. But that is what I love about listening to albums, is that when you listen to a full piece of art, there is something about when an artist just finds their specific flow, and you hear this massive confidence that you can tell isn't being coaxed out of them by a producer or a manager, and it is just their their time to shine. And I think that this was Lil Nas X's spotlight for this album.
Yeah, he recovered from the Satan Nikes quite well with a fantastic pop debut full length album, and I love that pick. That's fantastic.
Cool,
Um,
man. What's your number five?
my number five is Little by Little by the Marias, which is a group we'll talk about a little bit later. But this was when I was going through all of their songs. There's so many on that fucking album I like. Calling You Back. All I all I really want is you, Hush. But Little by Little, like you guys probably know by now, it being the most R&B song on the album is easily going to be my favorite. And since this technically fits within the realm of pop and not R&B, I made it my number five selection.
All right, I like that. We will definitely be talking about the Marias soon. And I'm going to reserve my thoughts for when we talk about the Marias. My number four was Magdalena Bay's Something for Two.
Ooh, yes, we will be talking about Magdalena Bay later as well. But God, yeah, Secrets Your Fire was my favorite on that, but that's a no skips album, so there was
No
no bad
skips.
pick you could have made from it. I felt like you and I were probably digging through the same piles for a lot of these songs in the pop genre, which I figured would be the case. That's a great pick. I definitely had that one in my honorable mentions. Not that song, but Magdalena Bay. And damn, good one. Um,
Where
but
you
like
at?
I said, we'll reserve our thoughts on that until we get to the albums category. My number four is Blue to Tiger Blondes, which is a song that just came out pretty recently.
Great song.
Yeah, she's just a fantastic bass player, and the bass groove in that song is so fucking infectious, so good. Flight Facilities remixed a song of hers earlier this year, and honestly, this sounds just as like funky and upbeat as like if you told me this was a Flight Facilities remix of this song, I would believe it. That's how good it is. Very looking forward to whatever she's got coming because it sounds like she's locked in on a really fun sound. Do you remember this one?
Absolutely. I remember specifically the bass line.
Mm-hmm.
Like you said, incredibly infectious. Um, and then you blew my mind a little bit by saying, well, I don't know if you know, but she does the bass. And I was like, fucking joking. Because
Yeah. The
that's
girl
real,
holding
man.
the giant bass in a lot of her album artwork is her.
That's awesome, man. That's a good pick, man. That's a good pick.
All right, what do you got number three, buddy?
Secrets by Magdalena Bay.
Oof. So you're Freddie Gibbs in me. Okay, I see. I see. Goddamn.
That's why I said we'll talk about them later because we're going to talk about them right now and then also later. So we can just move on
Oh my
because I
god.
think you and I both are going to talk about them on the albums. What's your number three?
God, that's a five-star song. My number three is one of the most impressive pop vocal performances of the year, and if I was in charge of Grammys, I would have nominated it, and that's Magic Jordan's Summer Rain. This song is them at their very best in terms of production and vocals. It's got all the trademark heavy pop, four to the floor sound that they're really known for, those classic 80s washed out synths. And his voice is just impeccable. Like it might sound heavily influenced by Michael Jackson, but that's not a bad person to be influenced by. And if your voice can even somewhat sound reminiscent of somebody that great, then you're on the right path. And I was really blown away by this song. What are your thoughts on it?
It's a it's a good song, man. Yeah, being influenced by Michael Jackson, Majid Jordan and Rusko might have the same influences then, because apparently Michael Jackson created dubstep. No, man.
Invincible's a good album. Shut up.
We're not going to get into that. We already did. I'll link to that specific podcast in the show notes because I think it was a fun conversation.
It was.
That's a good song, man. I think Majid Jordan is one of those artists that you can kind of put them in R&B or pop, and I think they kind of toe that line really well, in my opinion.
Yeah.
So good
Yeah.
shit.
What do you got at number 2?
I have Hush by the Marias.
Ooh, that great song. Fucking good. I know we're going to be talking about them a lot, and they deserve it, honestly. This is their end of the year awards, and they kind of took you and I both by a lot of surprise. They were making some waves online, apparently, and apparently their vinyl fans are very rowdy, but... And
what did they release? 25 of them total? Come on, guys. Let me get one.
Are they pressing them in a garage? Like, what the hell's going on? Oh man, that is just such a good album. Another absolute no skips. And that song is probably the peak of the album, even though it's just not my personal favorite. It's definitely going to be the one that I think of. Like, I think that sound best encapsulates them and that album as a whole.
Well, what was your number 2, sir?
My number 2 was a giant surprise to you, Adele All Night Parking Interlude.
It's an interlude?
Yeah, it's a fucking interlude, man. This is her doing like I don't want to say Amy Winehouse because that sounds crazy, but it really is. It's just like an Amy Winehouse kind of piano ballad, little down-tempo R&B, jazz. I fucking love it. I'm not an Adele fan. I've never really considered myself one, and I still really don't, but this is just one of those songs that hits me every time it comes on. I love the instrumental. I think her voice is fantastic on it. The lyrics are well written, beautiful song. I love it.
I get that. Honestly, I mean, we talked about the Adele album last month, and that vocal performance from her is just spectacular. So there's really nowhere you can hate besides it just not being your thing. And just not being your thing isn't really a musical critique. So you
exactly.
I think that's why I think I gave it a 7 or an 8 because it truly is a great album, just not my jam. And I totally get why you would choose that song. It was a good interlude, sir.
Yeah, it's beautiful. It's better than an interlude, man. It's gonna be me at the retirement home in 40 years.
Right, exactly.
So what do you got at your number 1 pop song of 2021?
Calling You Back by the Marias.
Oof. God damn it. You went for it.
I did.
List.
And you know what? Here's the thing, man. My pop charts were dominated by a bunch of different artists. And I could have chosen a couple of Olivia Rodrigo songs. I could have chosen a number of different things. But the reality is that my pop albums of the year it was the Marias and Magdalena Bay, man. And I kept going back to these 4 songs, and that's why they encapsulate my entire songs. So we're gonna talk about the Marias and Magdalena Bay later, but these songs defined my pop of 2021.
Yes, I couldn't agree more. Both of those albums are fantastic, and we'll talk about them in full shortly. So without further ado, I'll run through my number 1, which is Lizzo Rumors featuring Cardi B. Her last album, Cause I Love You, was one of my favorite albums of, I think, 2019 when it came out. Yeah. And I am a huge fan of hers. I think her music is great. I thought this was a great comeback single. I hope it's the beginning of a big album rollout. I'm usually not a big Cardi B fan, and I think her verse in this song is great. Any thoughts on Rumors?
It's funny because I'm also not a big Cardi B fan. And when I say not a big Cardi B fan, I'm not a Cardi B fan. And I loved this verse from her. We talked about it, and I'm glad to be pleasantly surprised by hearing Cardi B. So can't knock it there. That's a great pick, man. It's a great pick.
Yeah, I feel like when I think of pop as a genre, she's easily one of my top like 3-4 artists right now. So Yeah, she's fantastic, and that song is great. I'm actually surprised it didn't make your list. I thought it was going to.
It is a good song. It is a good song. But again, these five just kind of encapsulated all of my pop for 2021.
All right, well, let's get to the category Brandon's been waiting for, the most R&B songs of the year. All right, let's start this off. Number 5, what do you got?
All right, so R&B was fun, man. Getting to, I think one of my favorite parts of this category was revisiting my notes and how surprised I was at how disconnected I was from R&B. And how there's a bunch of good music that I'm missing. And while some of it, and I might even say half of the genre itself, isn't my jam, the other half of the album of the genre itself is definitely my jam. So let's get into it, man. My number 5 was Tone Stith, Scapegoat.
Yeah, you're gonna hear about some Tone pretty shortly too with me. Tone is fantastic. He was not just introduced to you this year, but to me as well. And he is just a very raw talent at the moment, but an undeniable one. His voice is fantastic. That's a great song. I did not expect that pick from you at all.
Well, what was your number 5, sir?
My number 5 is from an album we haven't talked about yet, but it is Khalid, All I Feel Is Rain featuring Jid. And this, maybe it's recency bias, like you said earlier, these lists kind of change every day. This is where they're at right now, though. And this song, God damn it, All I Feel Is Rain is probably the coolest name for an R&B song fucking ever. Like, that is incredible. This is Khalid at his most R&B so far with a fucking Jid verse. One of the really, really, like, I could not really, like, contain my excitement when I heard arpeggiated guitar in the instrumental. This gave me everything I was looking for and then some. It might be higher up like in a day or two, but it made the number 5 list after only being out for like a week. So we'll talk about that more when the album actually drops. But what is your number 4?
Yeah, my number 4 is a little song called Indecisive by Snow Allegra.
Oh boy. So the snow rubbed off on you, huh?
Yeah, man, revisiting this album after talking about it and listening to it that first time. And I think I've listened to it about 5 times this year, which is probably 5 times more than I listened to any other R&B album last year, like in totality. You know what I'm saying? Like it was fun, man. It was a good song. It's a good
There's
song.
a lot of parallels between her sound and Tyler, the Creators, this year. Him doing the production and vocals on 2 of her songs on the album. Both of them have this just top of their game confidence right now, and it just radiates through their music in a way that it's a quality that you can't force. And I think her last album was great, and when you go back to the singles, they're fantastic, but I feel like this is really her magnum opus. I think when it came out, I said it's her like Usher 8701.
Right.
Yeah, we'll get into that album as a whole shortly, but we don't really have to talk about this song because it is also my number 4, and we've already talked about it. So Snow Allegra, Indecisive. You could have picked any song off the album, but that little pitch shifted 90s chipped up vocal at the beginning just really like sets the album and the song off on a perfect note. I love it.
Yeah, man. This was a good song, and it's also probably a good segue to my number 3, which is Neon Peach by Snow Allegra.
I had a feeling we were going to get some more snow after you said that. So Neon Peach is another one of my favorites as well. What made you pick that one? Just revisiting the album
again, man. Revisiting the album and having just that one resonate with me just a little harder than the rest of the album. Choosing number 3 or number 4 for Neon Peach and Indecisive was actually kind of difficult, but I think I like Neon Peach a little better.
Interesting. Yeah, you didn't make a bad pick there. So my number 3 is Her, Come Through, featuring Brandon's favorite artist, Chris Brown. Let the record state Brandon is a huge Chris Brown fan. No, I'm
Your Honor, strike that objection.
So this song was fucking mind-blowing when it dropped, in my opinion. She drops what I would consider a perfect R&B song like every few months, and this just happened to be that. The album in total has more than a handful of those songs, and it was hard to kind of pick between them because there's Slide, but that one's about 2 years old. There's Damage, which I think is the one that's getting a lot of the Grammy nominations. It's a great song, but this is just the one production wise that I really think I stick with the most. Chris Brown honestly doesn't really add much to it, in my opinion, but I think it shines despite him, and that's how good she is and how good the song is.
Well, revisiting back in my mind, I gotta say, my number two is Trauma by her.
Oh, her featuring Corday, correct?
Let me double check. I think probably.
Yes, I'm like
Yep, it is
90%
Corday.
sure.
Yep, that's the one.
Yeah.
Her featuring Corday, Trauma. It just talked to me, man. The way they play off of each other in that song is really awesome, and it was a standout of the year for R&B.
Yeah, it's a fucking great song. He speaking of Corday, his album From a Bird's Eye View is coming out January 14th. So that's going to be our first big release of next year. Looking very much forward to that. And I'm really, really stoked to see him working with artists like her on these types of albums, because he always, every time he pops up on an album, he really adds a lot to it. And I felt like we all knew she was going to put out some great songs. So it's who could she add to them to bring out an even better side of her. And I think, like you said, the trade-off between them is just, it's perfect chemistry. And I thought it worked great. That's a great pick.
Thanks, man. What was your number two?
My number two was Comeback by Gallant. No surprise, he's like my favorite R&B artist of probably the last 5+ years. Easily, I think, the best voice in R&B right now. He just did his first independent release this year with Neptune, which we'll be talking about in the albums category. This song, like I said with Khalid, man, you put some arpeggiated guitar in an R&B beat, I'm fucking there. And this gave me everything I wanted. It gave me like the 90s R&B vibes. It gave me the modern Gallant vibes. I'm really happy to hear that his production didn't just fall off, but improved since going independent. I'm really excited for what's next.
Yeah, Neptune was a good song, was a good album, man.
Yeah, fantastic. It was kind of like hard to weigh it since it's only like 7-8 songs versus some of these bigger full masterpiece albums. But we'll get to that when we get there. What was your number one R&B song of the year?
Keep It Real by Tone Stith.
God damn it. Okay, you made me proud, Brandon. Yeah, Tone is
it's a good album. It's a good song, man. Like
I think what's fascinating is you're picking the songs that I would never think of to pick from Tone Stith. Like, I listened to like all the different songs because my number one is Fuck With Me by Tone Stith, which I'm pretty sure when it came out I said was going to be one of my most played songs.
I'm sure you did.
Yeah, that one is still, my wife, bless her heart, fucking hates hearing it by now, I'm sure, because it's been on repeat all year. Fantastic song. I love it. Never get tired of it. Tone, hope you drop a full-length album next year. I think it's time.
Right.
All right, so let's move on to a little bit more of a fun category to me. Rock. What's your number 5 pick for rock song of the year?
Number one, I think next year we need to separate rock from metal.
I knew this discussion was coming.
Because not doing that made this entire list very, very, very hard for me.
I agree.
So number 5 was Black Widow by Parquet Courts.
Ooh.
I chose this song, and I knew that was going to surprise you a little bit because I chose this song because as soon as this single dropped, I kept listening to this song, and then as soon as the album dropped, I would start on Black Widow, and it's a good song, man. It's catchy, it's infectious, it's fucking rock and roll, baby. Let's go.
There's there's no greater tell that you love a song is than when you catch yourself opening the album that you love a whole album of, but always just going to that damn song.
Right.
Um, and always going from there on. There's albums where like I'll like the fifth song, and like by the time I hear 1 through 4 again, it's been like months, and I'm like, oh yeah, these are on here. These are really good.
These are good too. Yeah.
That's fucking awesome. My number 5 pick, that was a great album, by the way.
It's good.
Yeah. My number 5 pick is Kenny Hoopla, Smoke Break, which is a song I was kind of like on the fence about. I feel like there is some better quote unquote rock songs. And like you said, not splitting rock into subgenres as a category made this very difficult. But this one just sounded like a song that would have come out in the MySpace era on a Wednesday night. And there'd be like a blog post about it or a bulletin post about it. And I don't know. I like that it took me back to that time.
Yeah, that album, that mixtape or whatever the fuck he calls it, kind of froze time a little bit. I think I rated it a 10 out of 10. I think it's probably more of a 9 out of 10, but it is a great album, and that's a great song off of it. I think Kenny did something special. And all of these numbers are arbitrary, obviously, but Kenny did something special this year, and I think it's definitely worth mentioning.
Yeah, that mixtape took us both by surprise, I think, as people that grew up in the peak of that genre and are kind of sticklers about it. He definitely earned some respect with that release. What do you got at number 4?
Number 4, I have a little song called Fuel Injected Suicide Machine by Fear Factory.
Wasn't that the name of the album as well?
No, the album was Aggression Continuum.
That's right.
But this was the first single off of it, and as soon as it dropped, you and I had a great conversation about it. And it again, I chose some of the songs that I kept going back to time and time again this year, and I think I woke up to Fuel Injected Suicide Machine for weeks. So how could I not put
peaceful.
it on my top 5?
Such a nice way to wake
sometimes
up.
I'll wake up to jazz, but when I got shit to do that day, bro, there's not much better than waking up to some fucking Fear Factory, okay?
Get the fuck out of bed, bitch, go. Oh, man. All right. I have no qualms with that pick. We talked about that album at length, and it's fantastic. That was definitely one of the best standout songs on it. No complaints here.
Where you at for number 4?
My number 4 is Bring Me the Horizon, Die For You, a band we constantly roll our eyes at.
I hate that song's so good.
Yeah, exactly. Dude, trust me. I was like, am I really doing this? But I went back and I was like, God damn it. It's a good song. I like it. It made my list. It's my personal taste at the moment, I guess, for what they do. And I think it works. I think since the change to this sound with Spirit or whatever album it was, this is one of their better songs.
Fair.
All right. What do you got at number 3?
I've got at number 3 a song called Bedhead by Manchester Orchestra.
Oh, that's a good one. We kind of forgot about that album, I felt, as the year went on. Yeah, a little bit. In terms of, you and I just didn't really talk about it, or them, I guess, because so many artists this year that released albums followed it up with something that we ended up covering, whether it was like a live track or a cover, but they kind of released their album and just maybe a remix or two came out, but I feel like it kind of went silent after that. So that's good that you brought that up, because that's a great one.
It's a great album, and this song hit number 3 for me because I would find myself, without listening to it, sometimes just singing this song in my head unprovoked, and having something that infectious just get into my brain and infiltrate it that well. Come on, man. Manchester Orchestra actually did release a Christmas album, I think about a week or two ago. It's okay. I listened to I skimmed through a couple of songs, and it's decent. It's no Cascade Christmas, but it's a different story. But Manchester Orchestra's Bedhead, again, I just kept singing it unprovoked after not having listened to it for 3 days. And if that's not one of my songs of the year, I don't know what you would consider that. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah, totally. That's a great pick. I love it.
Where are you at for number 3?
My number three is not really controversial, but a technicality, I guess. And that's going to be the live version of Stoned Again by King Cruel. We all know how I feel about King Cruel. This was a great live album, and I feel like this song is kind of the standout performance of it. It really showcases his just raw angst and emotion when he gets going. I love it. What are your thoughts?
That video you sent me, that specific video made me get it. It clicked.
Yeah.
And yeah, man, it's a great pick. It's definitely a technicality because that song did not release this year, but that version of the song did release this year, so I'll allow it.
Yeah, and I feel like sometimes a live version of a song can be just as good, if not better, than the original. And this might be one of those cases, honestly.
Right. Yeah.
All right, what do you got at number two?
All right. Another song that I just kept going back to, man. So I bought this CD and I put it in my car because I listened to specifically metal in my car. And because I like the neighbors have to know. So I'd say about 25% of the time I'd get in the car, I'd turn it on, I'd hear this album, and I'd flip to this song immediately to get me fucking pumped. And this song is Newfound by Gojira.
Oof. Okay. Love me some Gojira. I was hoping you would throw them on the list. What made you pick that over? Was that your favorite song on the album when we reviewed it?
Funny, I don't think it was. I think was it Fortitude? No.
Yeah, I think Fortitude was both of ours.
I think it was
possibly.
Fortitude.
Interesting.
But
so it was a grower.
yeah, because look, man, that whole groove with the double basses and oh man, it just gets me going, man. And I mean, it just gets me going, dude. It's one of those songs that will forever live in my metal repertoire for a long time, forever. It'll forever live there.
Yes, and Brandon's metal repertoire is quite the repertoire. Trust me.
It's unfortunately extensive. That's
the only way to describe it at this point.
Where you at for number two, Johnny?
My number two is "Taking Me Back" by Jack White. This is maybe one of my favorite singles of his so far since being a quote unquote solo artist. I love this. This is just fucking good old fashioned rock and roll done the right way, in my opinion.
It's Jack White ripping, man.
Yeah, fucking ripping, dude. And the gently version is good too, but this is what I think of when I think of rock.
No, you're right. It's Jack White epitomized.
Yeah, this was almost my number one, but I'm interested in hearing what your number one is first.
I think you know what my number one is, sir. It's Revolution in Limbo by Between the Buried and Me. Was there a question after the single release that this would not be my number one?
No, not really. Maybe Fix the Error. I don't know. Those were both really good
very
songs.
good. But no, man, Revolution in Limbo got it, man. The lyrics, the length, the technicality, the duality between pretty and innocent and heavy and disgusting and just everything, the way this song, the way it leads into the next song. I mean, everything about this song it's just perfect. This song is just perfect, man. This album is perfect. This song is perfect. I had this album and this song on repeat since it released. It hasn't stopped. I listened to it today. like it is.
Dude, it's a masterpiece.
It's a masterpiece.
We're going to talk about the album more shortly, so I'll reserve my thoughts for that.
What's your number one, sir?
My number one is perhaps the angriest song I've heard in a long time, and that is Planet Shit by Every Time I Die.
Yes.
Goddamn, I miss them. Their last album before this, Low Teens, was fantastic, and it felt like a long wait for this one, but it was more than worth it, and this was far and away my favorite song on the album. Easy number one pick for me.
Such a good song, man. Yeah. I feel like if Every Time I Die had released that album, if they had released Radical earlier in the year and I hadn't sat with all of these other songs, that would have definitely been in here. Planet Shit is my number 6. That's
Yeah.
I had to bump it off of this list multiple times because I kept going back and saying, well, this is it, but I had to go with the songs that I kept going back to, and I haven't had time with Radical enough to go back to it a number of times, if that makes sense.
No, that totally makes sense. And it's a longer album than I remember it being when I kept revisiting it.
It's big.
Too, but we will talk about it more shortly. All right, let's get on to a little fun bonus category that we threw in here, and that's top 5 remixes. We don't have to go too long on the explanations for these, but what's your number 5 in terms of remixes of the year?
My number 5 was Faithless with Insomnia 2021 with Maceo Plex Epic edit. And it was just so good, man. It was a good edit of this classic fucking song. I could not throw it on here. I'm glad you threw this category on here because you're right, it's a fun bonus, and it made me go through all the remixes. What was your number 5?
Oh, man, I had so much fun going through the playlist for these. That's a great pick. And Maceo Plex did a good job flipping it, like you said, a really classic song. My number 5 is also a flip of a very classic song, and that's More Than a Woman, the S.G. Lewis remix by the Bee Gees.
Oh, man, that's a good remix.
Yeah, it's very subtle, but I feel like it's nuanced, and it really does the song justice. What's your number 4?
My number 4 is Gareth Emery, song called Gunshots, Matt Lange remix.
Oh, man, I forgot about that remix.
I know,
This is fun. I feel like we're going to have completely different lists for the most part.
I love it. Where you at for number 4?
Ooh, number 4. I went kind of a weird pick. Klangstoff, New Congress, New Father, the Ramses remix, which is 2 members of Klangstoff remixing their own music.
Gotta love
I
that.
love this. Yeah, I love the sounds to this remix. I think it's fucking fantastic. What do you got for number 3?
Number 3, I have Joywave, Every Window is a Mirror, your favorite song this year, Eiffel 65 remix.
Okay, I was going to stop this podcast if you didn't pick the Eiffel 65 remix. Yeah,
I had to, man.
That's my number 6, so I'll put that out there right now. That one's a great one. At number 3 for me, I have the Gaspard Auger and Victor Lamasny remix of Keep Moving by Jungle. This is, top-notch artist remixing top-notch artists. It's perfect. I love it. Nice. What do you got at number 2?
I have a little song called All Night Long by Boys Noise, Purple Disco Machine remix. They did such a good job, man.
God. Great job. That's my number 7. Oh man, not putting that one in my top 5 was a very, very hard choice. But the only reason I didn't is because of the next 2. So my number 2 is Anything, the Body Ocean remix, Alice in Wonderland and Valentino Khan.
Oh, that's a good one.
Whew, I went back deep for this one.
Yeah,
buddy.
that
This
was
is
like
one of
February
our first
or
episodes.
something. Yeah.
Fantastic remix. She's now resurfacing with a new song we'll be covering in our next episode. But I almost can't hear the original to this song because this remix is so good and I've heard it so many times.
Don't you love that? Don't you love that?
Yeah, and it's funny because the original played in a TV show we were watching the other day, and we're like, what the fuck song is this? But yeah. All right, what's your number 1?
My number 1 is a song called What If Midday Was at Midnight by an artist named Agoria, which I've never heard the original of, and I don't think I ever will. And it's a Colsh remix.
Mm-hmm.
The strings in this song just get it, man.
Yep. That's like Hans Zimmer shit going on.
It really is, man. It's composure, dude. It is beauty. It is grace. Like, it is just awesome. What was your number 1? I'm so excited.
It is somebody we talked about earlier. Actually, it's the Flight Facilities remix of Vintage by Blue to Tiger. I feel like this was one of their first releases this year. I think maybe even before Lights Up, and goddamn, it's fantastic. They need to remix more songs.
That was my number 6.
Fucking great. Yeah, so good. All right, are you ready, buddy?
I'm ready. Let's get into it.
We're going to get into the albums now. Let's start. Electronic / dance. What's your number 5?
S.G. Lewis Times. It was an easy album to put on my top 5. It was not easy to order. Put in order, rather.
I agree.
This album has been pervasive this entire year. He has done really special stuff, and I can't stop listening to this album. It's a great great album, front to back, no skips. Nile Rodgers kills it. Channel Trace kills it. S.G. Lewis just destroys it. It's a great
It's
album.
it's fucking great. And I feel like what we should do with this is because there's so many candidates, let's go through our top fives and then we'll talk about the ones that didn't make it because I'm sure there's going to be a few.
All right.
So, my number five is Res Spiral, a very
Uh,
recent release. Whew, I feel like trying to even boil this album down to its best songs versus these other albums, which is kind of the way I'm trying to rank these. They're all great. So it's how many songs are like this is like they're all no skips albums. So you have to find out how many are like perfect songs on an album. And I feel like she nailed the formula of what she's been working towards, and this album is her best yet.
she really did it. She
Yep.
really did it.
She went there. What's your number four?
My number four is Nurture, Porter Robinson.
Wow, that's low. Four? Are you sure about that?
I'm sure, man.
Are you sure?
I did so much soul searching, and
No way.
this album is
Your
number
Grammys,
four.
you're gonna Grammys him?
I'm sorry. I'm sorry, Porter. Look, man. The first time I listened to this album, it was an experience. I cried. I laughed. I danced. It's a beautiful album, and it is very close to perfect. Between my number three and this one was a hard pick, but I really went with what I went back to more often. And I think you've already heard me say that this episode, and you're gonna hear me say it again. And regardless of whether or not I wanted to like this one, or whether or not this one meant more to me than my other top three, I didn't go back to this album as much as I went back to the other albums, only because it's more of an experience to me than an album, and it is very close to perfect. What was your number four, John?
That's a great explanation. And I'll talk about why shortly. My number four is SG Lewis Times. It was your number five. I felt like this one was easily going to be around the bottom of our top fives. I knew it wouldn't really crack the top three just because there was some fucking heaters this year. I won't add too much to what you said. Just fantastic. Really put himself in a different category of artist with this one, to the point where I think he's going to be headlining some main stages in the next few years if festivals get back to normal. Great album. I would love to see him live. But let's get into the nitty gritty of this, the top three, the impossible ones, the Sophie's choices, if you will. What's your number three?
So before I say what my number three is, I need to say again, these are the albums I kept going back to, and I'm going to surprise you, and I'm going to surprise probably other people listening, but with my top three. But my number three was an album called Feed Me by Feed Me.
Stream Feed Me by Feed Me. No, that's a great one, and that doesn't surprise me at all. I knew Feed Me was going to be on your list. He did not quite make my top five, and I knew you might look at me weird for that. But we kind of had the discussion, and it's very interesting that you said the ones you keep going back to, because when that album came out, you were like, sometimes I question if I'm still a fan of like this chaotic bassy music, or if I'm just holding on to these memories and the nostalgia that they bring me. And I feel like, no, you like what you like. And if you still like, I still like some screamo shit. It's not great, but maybe a nostalgia plays a factor, but it's not the only thing. But if that's what you found yourself going back to more than anything, whether it's because it's more fun to you, then that matters, because I'll get into that in our next genre category. But you can think another album is better than that and still enjoy that one more. Those aren't mutually exclusive things. So I totally understand that pick.
Which is exactly what I was talking about with the Porter Robinson pick at number four for me, was because I think Porter Robinson Nurture is a better album than probably the rest of my top three. But I went back to these other ones more. What was your number three, sir?
My number three was Jungle, Loving in Stereo.
Yep.
I have my top three are all kind of 10 out of 10s to me, and it was really fucking hard to pick between them. But I thought Jungle really did some incredible things on this album. They remind me, like I said earlier, of like Daft Punk and Justice at times. They remind me of Chemical Brothers at times. They remind me of Fatboy Slim at times. They have unique hip hop collaborations on there. This album, like the Porter one, is an experience, but it's, I guess, for lack of a better word, a little bit more of a fun ride. It's a party, and it's a party that you want to revisit. And I found myself revisiting it so much. I've actually been digging into their back catalog, and I'm really enjoying some of that now. They're a fantastic group, probably like my favorite new group of the year. I'm interested to see if they crack your top list. What do you got at number two?
My number two is a little album called Forever by Flight Facilities.
Okay. Yes, sir. All right. Well, let's just talk about this now, because that's also my number two.
I knew it would be.
Yes. So, man, what is there to say about this album that we haven't? We built up to this album for months. We didn't know it was officially coming until late in the year. We finally get it on a very crowded release day, and it still lives up to the expectation, blows us away, and keeps us coming back for more. What is it that's so great about this album?
It is iconic, bro. It's just special, man. It encapsulates everything that everything, all of the music trends since they released. I forget the name of their first one, but
Down to Earth.
Down to Earth. It encapsulates all of the music trends since then, and it also sounds like it was released in 2021 because it was. But I don't know how they did it, man, but they blended all of the sounds, all of the hip hop, all of the God, it's just they just did house music right this time. And it's as close to perfect as you're going to get, man.
Yeah, they've really created their own subgenre of house music. Like I think Heavy and songs like Crave You kind of both encapsulate what we're talking about when we say that.
Yep.
But there's no other artist making songs that sound like that, very similar to Porter Robinson and the way he approaches music. I think that they are a band that if you're a fan of requires patience, but I feel like they really do give you quality every time, and they're just making sure that everything they release is of the highest quality.
Yep, I'll agree to that.
All right, buddy. Well, what's your number one electronic / dance album of the year?
My electronic / dance album of the year is an album that came out very early this year. I think it might have been February or March. And I could not stop listening to it. I bought the vinyl. I watched their live stream multiple times. I have dived into their past. I've looked into the individual dudes, their side projects. I mean, it is probably going to be surprising to you, but it is an album called Isles by a group named Bicep.
Yeah, so not surprising, because
Okay.
I've seen that one lingering on your albums of the year list back the last few times I snooped it like a couple months ago. And I remember, I don't think we covered it when it came out. We, I think I think I went back through our playlist, and at least might have been before we were archiving them or something.
I
But
think so.
yeah, I don't remember covering it, but I remember asking you about it when I saw it, and I dove in, and they are fantastic. It was That album is a very surprising pick because of like our familiarity with these other artists, but not surprising in terms of overall quality at all, because it definitely stands toe to toe with these if you're a fan of them or that specific genre. It's a little different.
It's just so unique. Exactly. Like it's so different. It's so unique, and it hits all of my buttons for dance music, and they do it so well. Yeah, I'm gonna listen to it right after we get off of this. It's a 10 out of 10, man. It's a great album, and it is my album of the year. And it's funny because no songs of theirs hit my top 5 because there were songs on other people's albums that I went back to. But this album as a whole, I kept listening to this one, and it's almost as if when I started it, I couldn't finish it, or I needed to finish it, rather.
Yeah.
Couldn't stop until I finished it, sort of thing. So All
Yeah, the
right.
way they approach music reminds me a lot of Chemical Brothers, so I'm not really surprised that you're such a big fan of them.
Yeah. Yeah, I see that. Did you
Uh,
know that I was a big Chemical Brothers fan? That's weird.
Um, I think people you have never met know that,
All
Brandon. uh, all right,
right, my
so
man. What's your number one?
you already know what it is.
I
It's Porter
know.
Robinson Nurture. It is a perfect album. It's just an endless well of creativity, is what I kind of find going back to it. But I think I've said everything I could say about how much I love it, but I kind of want to talk about what you were talking about, and that's just how big of an experience it is. I totally get that it's a draining experience too. It's a very long album, especially for the genre. These songs almost play out like a fucking video game score or soundtrack at times. Like it's so weird with the approach and the overall tone. And you kind of like, if you're not in the right headspace, it's not that you can't appreciate it. It's just that it doesn't hit you the right way. You're not gonna feel the ride that it's gonna take you on. And so often, like I think when you or I are probably like in the heat of our day jobs, it's like I can't really focus on this right now. This is a lot to listen to and
Real.
process. But man, I think when you sit down, and that's kind of how I reapproached all these albums, was just sit down with the headphones on, get that fully submersive experience. And this is the ride I enjoyed the most. And I feel like this is the one that will stand the test of time. This is going to be an album that's talked about 7, 8 years from now, just like Worlds is.
Yeah.
Um, Fantastic. He did not get nominated for a Grammy, which again, fuck the Grammys, but that is horrible because there's really no. I don't understand what they heard when he submitted it if they did not select that, and I honestly don't think he really cares at the end of the day. The Fader actually just released their top albums of the year, and he got number one, which is really
Wow.
surprising. All genres, yeah. I picked
Wow.
Porter Robinson Nurture, so it's not just us. Um, he's kind of his own brand. Being a fan of Porter at this point feels like you're part of a community, which is a following like so few artists can really cultivate. And he does it in a really healthy way that's kind of interesting. Like it's very
Yep.
wholesome.
It's
And
very
yeah, going to Second Sky is not going to Astro World. Those are two completely different experiences.
you're about to get nurtured over some nature.
Yeah.
You know what I'm saying? Like,
Everyone swaddle that person and make sure they're okay.
can we get blankets? Can we get blankets over here?
All right, so that's our top fives in electronic slash dance. So I'm going to talk about some omissions from both of ours, since we kind of both omitted at least two that I think are worth mentioning, and that is
Boys Noise
Gaspard
Polarity.
Auger, Escapades, and Boys Noise Polarity. Um,
Oh,
these are the decisions I do not like to make.
right.
When I boiled down the Boys Noise album, I still think it's fantastic, maybe a solid 8. I thought the Res one had more songs that I enjoyed going back to, like we were talking about, and that's kind of why that one won out. And same thing with the Gaspard one. That one is a really, really unique approach to electronic music. You can even consider that one rock a little bit if you want, or even pop at times. It's a unique experience, but I feel like its variety almost keeps it from being consistent in a way that we consider these other albums as such cohesive visions start to finish.
So I think I'm gonna agree with you on Gaspard because I bought the vinyl and I separate them by genre now. I don't know if I've told you that,
Mm-hmm.
but I have a funk and soul genre at the bottom of my little cubby cabinet guy, and I put Gaspard in the funk and soul because I think it fits there more than it fits anywhere else. It's
Interesting.
electronic music, but God, there's so much soul in that album, man. It is filled to the top with soul. And I think looking back, let's say 5 years from now, we're gonna look back and say, wow, how wasn't this album on our top five? It's definitely on my top 10. I think it's number.
Yeah.
I think so. Here's my number 6 is Justice Loving in Stereo, or I'm sorry, Jungle Loving in Stereo. My number 7 is Boys Noise Polarity, and then my number 8 is Gaspard Escapades, and not including Jungle on my top 5 was hard, but again, I had to go with what am I going back to and what am I listening to the most, and I'll probably kick myself later next year for not including Jungle or Gaspard on here, but I'll kind of reiterate what you said about the Boys Noise album. It's good, but it was an 8 out of 10, which is, if he would released it in 2020, it would have been on our top 5, but we had S.G. Lewis and Feed Me and Porter and Flight Facilities to go through, like there was so much more to go through this year. And I love what he did with that piece of art, because it is a piece of art, just like Mayday was, just like just like Out of the Black was, and just like Oi 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 was, but it was just under that line. So
Yeah. And honestly, beyond our top tens, we got Gorgon City released a fantastic album. There was Stephen Bodson released a 2-hour album that
Zoo
was great.
released
Black
a good
Coffee,
album.
Zoo, Black Coffee. God, I mean, there was
San Holo.
Yeah.
It was a good album, man.
It was a crazy year for this genre. Rufus Du Sol.
Yeah, that's right, man.
Dude, and yeah, these all albums, like I said, this whole year in electronic / dance is going to be still being processed for the next 5 years, and then we'll be like, what the hell just happened in 2021?
Yeah, man, it's an amalgam of the top players of the genre at the top of their game, releasing top level pieces of art. And it was hard. This was probably my hardest, and I had a lot of rock to sift through. Don't get me wrong, but these decisions were the hardest decisions to make this year.
Yeah, that category was for sure the hardest one, but also the most fun to go back and sort. All right, so that was fun. We'll move on to hip hop / rap right now.
All right,
and let's start with your number 5.
My number 5, and I told you we were going to talk about him later today. My number 5 is The Plugs I Met 2, Benny the Butcher.
Yep, I had a feeling it would be another album I'd seen lingering on your albums of the year list. That one, I think, really took us both by surprise when it came out. We were both kind of aware of who he was, maybe from the internet or seeing his name as a feature, but that one was the one that made you and I both fans of him.
I mean, I think it's like you said. So with Benny the Butcher, when you release a song that says "When Tony Met Sosa," it's got to live up to that shit. And oh my God, did it live up to it. This entire album is filled to the top with bangers. You've got Plug Talk with 2 Chainz. You've got Talking Back with Fat Joe. You've got a Rick Ross feature, a Harry...
Thanksgiving.
God, man, this album is just... It's a lot of fun to go back to, man. It's a lot of fun to go back to. Where are you at for number 5, Mr. John?
Oh, so number 5, I picked Amine 2.5. And I know this is probably surprising since I think I rated it a 6 about a month ago. So let me explain. I'm going to, and you don't have to tip your hand as if any of these are yours, but I'll just explain why they didn't make mine. So albums that are not in my top 5 that are probably better than this album: Mick Jenkins, Elephant in the Room, Code of the Friend, To Kill a Sunrise. Those are just 2 off the top of my head. Benny the Butcher, The Plugs I Met Part 2. These are all the ones that fill out the back half of my top 10. But the reason I pick Amine is just because it's the one I keep going back to. And I think the reason I keep going back to it is just because of how fun of an album it is.
It's fun. It's no pressure.
Yeah. I think I listened to it twice today, and it's like a 20-minute experience. And I feel like, while it's easy to kind of think of it as a breeze and be like, yeah, that was okay, when you find yourself going back to it as much as I do, I feel like it had an infectious quality that he knew would like earworm its way into the consciousness. They just wouldn't realize it. And it's really taken me by hold. And I'm a big fan of it. I think it's better than I rated it. What is your number 4?
Alrighty, man. Well, my number 4 is Weight of the World by Maxo Cream.
Ooh, doggy. Okay.
So this album is everything I like about rap, and I hadn't heard a Maxo Cream song until I threw on this album. And it slaps. It fucks. It gets to the point. It talks about trauma and emotion and just turmoil, all in this roundabout, confident, and kind of blasé style rhymes that it hit me, man. I kept coming back to it.
Yeah, there's not a skip on that album. That one, I'll be talking about it up here pretty shortly in terms of what number it is for me, but I'll elaborate on it now. It's a perfect album. And like you said, it's just everything we kind of look for when one of these is released. It's like, is this going to be another overly serious thing? Is this going to be, like kind of J. Cole's very meticulously thought out, but not necessarily fun projects? This is just a breath of fresh air in the genre. And it's not that it's fun. Like he's rapping about some very heavy real life shit at times, but he does it in a way that's so digestible and it's interesting, and his references feel more like just a weird kid you would have hung out with after school talking about movies and comic books and wrestling and shit. Like his frame of reference is not one you typically hear from, and like for being kind of a hard scary dude like the persona he's rapping under, it's really funny and kind of disarming when you get into the lyrical content. And like I was not anticipating like to feel the things I felt by the end of this album. And songs like Trips really make you feel like him on a personal level or somewhat of his journey, and he's just fantastic. I love it. Great pick. One of the best albums of the year.
Where you at?
Number 4, Vince Staples by Vince Staples. Kind of same with the Amine thing. These like little 20-minute albums, there's something to them. I don't know if Daytona changed the way I listen to hip hop or consider what an album can be, but these are 2 albums, while both longer in track length than like an 8-song project, they zip by before you know it. And there's something about the second an album ends, like you said with Sebastian earlier, to where you're like, I have to listen to that again. These Vince Staples, one of my favorite rappers, probably top 5, top 10. And I was very disarmed by how like stripped down this sounded compared to a lot of his other productions. It's not very bombastic. It's him very contemplative. And I feel like it worked to a great effect versus like this being a chance that didn't work out. This is great. And he can fucking do anything, honestly.
Yeah, absolutely.
The guy raps about Pokemon.
And he does a good job at it. All right, we're gonna revisit Vince in a minute. My number 3 was Tyler the Creator. Call Me If You Get Lost.
Okay, you want to get into that right now?
Let's
do that. So you had the unfortunate task of like trying to review this album on mic after like one listen, like an hour before we recorded. Yep. How are you feeling with it this many months later?
So there are some album reviewers out there that will listen to an album a couple of times and then post this really intricate album review about it and give it a rating. And how the fuck do you do that? I just don't understand it, man. I think I rated it a 7 or an 8 when I first reviewed it. And it's easy a 9 after I've revisited it a number of times. And it's great, man. And I definitely needed more time with it before we had sat down and listened to it, or before we had sat down and reviewed it. Because it's a grower. It's also a shower, but it's definitely a grower. And how emotional he gets while still talking about how he just bought a boat, bitch. Like there's a level of vulnerability and confidence, and the collision between vulnerability and confidence that really shines on this album, and I loved it.
Yeah, he has nothing else to hide, honestly, and I feel like that's where he shines. He just has this freedom in his music. Um, this isn't the number that I have this at again, but I'll talk about this one right now just for brevity's sake. And I think the DJ drama aspect of it really threw a lot of people off when it came out because they weren't
Me included.
either weren't familiar with Gangsters and Grills or why Tyler was approaching an album like this. And I feel like on the first listen or two, it feels more prevalent than it really is because he he just has this way of adapting a new style with every album. And I think while he'd kind of locked into somewhat of a pop overture with the last two albums before this, we weren't really like anticipating exactly what this one was going to sound like. Hearing, yeah, like the intro by DJ Drama start, and we're all like, okay, is this a mixtape? Is this an album? What is it? But I feel like when you stop trying to figure out what it is when you really open up and enjoy it. And that's what we really need to just start doing with music more often, is stop trying. And it's funny, as somewhat music critiquers, you and I, it's like you catch yourself just being overly like critical or overly serious when getting in thought about these things. And he's just one of those guys that kind of with his music slaps you across the face and it's just like, shut up, enjoy life. And I fucking love that about him.
Oh, that's a great way to look at it, man. Yeah. And that's kind of partly why Vince Staples got my number 2, because it's not an album. It could have been an EP, right? He could have he could have called it an EP and it wouldn't be on this list. But it is some of the most pure 25 minutes you can get in 2021. So
I agree 100%. So that's your number 2, correct?
Yep.
All right. So we skipped over my number 3, which is Nas King's Disease 2. But like I said, we've covered some of mine that are ahead of this already. So this one, God, I was really taken by surprise when it came out, because I thought following up King's Disease 1 in less than a year was kind of pushing it, at least creativity wise. And it was a good reminder to just never doubt somebody as good as Nas, because this album is, with the exception of a few questionable like features, this is a front to back, no skips, classic. And I feel like probably his best album since 2010. I think in every way, shape, and form, it's better than King's Disease 1. And I really, really think Hit Boy has like reinvigorated Nas to be the guy we heard about growing up. And it's fucking awesome to hear him this dialed in. Any thoughts on King's Disease, or is that one on yours coming up?
Yeah, we'll talk about Nas in a little bit.
So
Vince is my number 2. We've talked about Vince. It's incredible. What's your number 2?
My number 2 was Maxo Cream, Weight of the World, which we've already talked about as well, which is why I said I would get to that one. And we're going to talk about that in the top 10 a little bit too. So we'll just breeze by it for now. Let's your number 1?
My number 1 is Nas King's Disease 2.
Okay, there it is. Anything you want to add?
No, man, it's great. Oh, man, it's my number 1 because I kept going back to it the most often. Regardless of how bad Eminem's verse is, everything else about that album is incredible.
Yes.
And yeah, man, it hits different. It reminds me of old Nas. I mean, it's funny because I've really enjoyed for a long time the Queensbridge New York gangster rappers, and Mobb Deep and Nas, the late 90s. Not that I was listening to them in the late 90s, but when I was discovering, hip hop and kind of finding what I really liked about it, those 2 albums stand out for me in all-time favorite hip hop albums, Illmatic and I don't know why, but I'm blanking on the Mobb Deep album.
The one with Shook One's Part 2.
No, I'm gonna look it up. Hold on. Now I need to know. I'm gonna hate myself for not remembering it,
You're gonna drive
but
yourself
I'm
crazy.
gonna drive myself crazy. It is the Infamous, obviously.
Yes,
Yep,
yes.
that's the one. So the Infamous, and there was one other one that really did it. Where is it? It was Murder Music. That's the one.
Got it.
Those two albums really resonate with me as far as hip hop goes as a whole, and to hear Nas just kind of be in his what I feel after King's Disease 1 back in his groove just made me reminisce a little bit. So
Yep. And that's a common theme throughout the album is kind of just him reminiscing back on his career. This is like him with the chalice, just taking his
yep.
victory lap. And it's fucking great. You throw him with some chopped up soul out there, I'm going to listen to it every time. Um, yeah, that's great that you picked it number one. I had a feeling our top fives in this genre would be similar. And that's why my number one, to no one's surprise, Tyler the Creator, Call Me If You Get Lost. I had Maxo at number one for a few
It's
weeks,
a
but
good album, man.
I think it was because I spun the Tyler one just too much when it dropped that I wasn't appreciating it. But when I went back and did the final listen and ranking, I was like, this is just one of the best of all time at his best still. Like this 3 album run is the run, I think. Hopefully it doesn't stop here, but like all of my favorite rappers kind of have that 3 album run that defines their career. And it's hard to say that this isn't it. Um, so yeah, I think as much as I love the excitement of a guy like Maxo holding his own on an album that actually features Tyler the Creator, it it just doesn't do enough to edge out Tyler this year. But fantastic album and still going to make my overall top 10. All
Yeah,
right.
definitely great choice. This was a hard decision, but not as hard as the Electronic was.
No, I am very surprised that Code of the Friend was not on yours. I thought To
Both
Kill a
of
Sunrise would be
those
on
albums
yours.
were so good, man. If you can consider Lyrics to Go an album, which I kind of didn't consider for this list, because I feel like it was just kind of pieced together. But To Kill a Sunrise is great, and it's definitely my number 6 or 7. I grabbed the vinyl while I could, because if anybody knows about buying Code of the Friend albums, you can't get them for under $300 nowadays. So I immediately pre-ordered this one because fuck everybody. So, but yeah, man, it was easily my 6 or 7. But these other ones that came out after that just fucking kind of killed it. So you can't really release an album on the same year as fucking Nas and Tyler and expect to come out on top, you know?
Very true. Very true. All right. Let's move on to pop. And again, I'm sure this is going to be little bit different than what most people define as pop. But what do you got at number 5?
I think I have a controversial artist in this list, but this one is not controversial. We talked about it when it came out, and I thought it was okay, and I still think it's okay, but there wasn't, in my opinion, a lot that kind of fit the mold of the genre pop, as well as this one did for me in this number 5 spot. I chose Planet Her, Doja Cat.
Interesting. I would not expect that pick from you.
I listened to it again, and it's fine. It's good.
No, it's a well done album. It's very well produced, if nothing else.
Yes.
And I feel like when you go back, you realize there's more high points on it than you kind of realize.
It's exactly what happened. So
Yeah, yeah. And I can't fault you for that. All right.
Where
My
you
number
at?
5 is K-Flay, Outside Voices. I know this is technically an EP, but it was 5
Yeah,
perfect
isn't
songs.
that cheating?
No, it's not. These are projects, Brandon. We have talked about this. The letters EP are not in the title, so tell me it's not an album.
I will defend your right to call this an album until the day we die, John.
Thank you. Brandon is fighting for my rights. I thought that this was just very, very fucking impressive, man. I never really considered myself a giant like K-Flay fan or anything, but this one really took me by surprise, and I felt like there was just so many like really moments that you wanted to go back to. Obviously, I'm Afraid of the Internet is the high point of the EP and probably going to be like the song you and I are talking about the most going forward. But it's a great EP front to back, and I think it deserved a spot in the top five.
All right, that's fair. That's fair.
What do you got at number four?
Magdalena Bay, Mercurial World.
Beautiful pick. Beautiful pick.
It's so good, man. I can't get enough of this album. It's great. It's really good.
It's power pop, it's synth pop, it's bedroom pop, it's all sorts of weird shit with this 90s cyberspace aesthetic like that they're going for. It's fantastic. It's got a little bit of R&B in there. Fantastic album. That one's a little bit higher up on mine, so I'll talk about it a little more soon. But my number four is Magic Jordan, Wildest Dreams. I think this was another one kind of like Doja for you. I rated it like a 6 or 7 when it came out, but when I really went back to these, I was like, God damn, this album is just one you kind of have to spend some time with, because I feel like the work that went into the production for it alone gets it a spot on this list, but the vocal performance lives up as well.
All right. I like that.
What do you got at number 3?
Number 3, I have a little album called Sour by Olivia Rodrigo.
Undeniably the most popular album in the world this year. Yeah, that
it
song
is so good.
Yeah, it's one of the most impressive pop debuts I've ever heard. And Brandon knows that I'm kind of like a curmudgeon, I guess, about pop and Taylor Swift and this kind of sound, but it's fun. I think maybe I'm a fan of it because obviously it's a little bit Paramore-y at times, and those tend to be the songs that I enjoy. But as great as that album is, I've heard some of those songs now so many times that they make me want to blow my fucking brains out when I hear them. But they're still great. I will give her props.
Pro tip, don't listen to the radio.
Don't go into a Walgreens if you don't want to hear Blinding Lights by The Weeknd, okay? All right, so my number 3 is Deb Never, Where Have All the Flowers Gone? This one, perfect. This do not fight me on the EP shit either, man. I will kill you. No, this one's, I think, about eight songs. It's a little more fleshed out, but this one was almost my number 1 had these other 2 albums not come along. But this one is, I think, everything I wish more pop artists were, and that's not so confined to the whatever the radio is doing, and just kind of finding your own voice. Like, I feel like writing music with a band as opposed to with a producer in pop yields a lot better results. And I feel like a lot of her stuff has like this live instrumentation feel to it that gives it a different edge than a lot of modern pop. And that's why I picked it for my number 3. But
so,
what is... Oh, go for it.
Well, I just need to say I stayed away from EPs because I don't know. I didn't think that we were counting them. I'm going to go ahead and change my number 5 then to Deb Never. So just retroactively here.
Yes.
I'm assuming you were going to ask me about my number 2.
Yes.
My number 2 is the upset I was talking about. I'm going to classify it as a pop album, and I don't really care what anybody else thinks. My number 2 pop album of the year is Bo Burnham's Inside.
I think if you're going to fit it into any of the top 5 classic categories, that's the one it fits in. Obviously, it's a comedy album. Obviously, it's a special soundtrack.
Is it, though? Because he talks a lot of truth in that album, bro.
A lot of the funniest shit is true, Brandon. I feel like that album connects with us in a way. That album, as much as I said I was going to need a spot for it, did not end up making any of my final lists. It was just outside my overall top 10. But I thought that's probably one of my favorite albums to go back and listen to, especially like I drive a lot for work. And if I'm in like stressful situations, that's one to throw on and you just kind of forget about everything. It's fun to sing along to. It's fun to listen to.
Great
it's
album.
Very well written. But as you said, when we reviewed it as an album, and I think in our halfway to the year special, it's one of those things that it's best if you get to see the whole fucking video with it too.
Yes.
Not just because the visuals to the songs, but the entire parts of it that aren't on the actual soundtrack.
Right.
So much good shit. Great pick. I have no complaints there. But my number two pick is one we just briefly talked about, Magdalena Bay, Mercurial World. Like I said, Bo Burnham was kind of bumped because this album came along so
Such a
late.
good
And
album, man.
yeah, one of my favorite things to do when a new album comes out that I know Brandon and I both like is to text him and ask him if he got the vinyl. And I assume you have received it and listened to it at this point, Brandon.
Multiple times.
How you enjoying it?
It's great, man. It's good. It's honestly really easy to put on and just kind of low volume listen to it. It's not one of those, let's bump it in the house. It is kind of just chill pop music, man. It's great. It's great, louder than background music, if that makes sense.
Yes, that's a perfect way to describe it, actually. It's an album that's still fairly new to us, but I think that the impact it's had in both of our kind of rotations and lives has been immediate. And I think that it's very impressive that we've kind of turned this corner with pop to where we're so much more open-minded, and these bands that we're like thinking, oh, they're probably just hype, turn out to be some of the best music of the year. So
Right.
good shit.
It's really good, man.
All right. I think our number one's the same. I'm gonna
The
go
Maria's
ahead and
Cinema.
yeah. Okay. So it's undeniable, right? I don't know what you could even possibly like think of changing about this album from a critical standpoint. It feels just perfectly written. It's a debut album, which makes it even more impressive. I'm constantly blown away every time I listen to it by like how fucking good they are already. It sounds so much more like thought out than any other pop music I've heard this year. All the songs feel, I don't know, they're just, there's no skips albums, but then there's those no skips where it's every song is great. And that's
Right.
kind of where I am with this song. Like the whole, there's some songs in the back half that I'd consider album cuts more or less, but like look at your top pop songs of the year. It was like 3 Maria's songs
Right.
or whatever. Like that's the power that they have, and that's how good this album is. What would you like to add to that?
Nothing. It's
Yeah.
a fantastic album. I will continue to revisit this album as often as I can. And if anybody has a vinyl to sell me at a reasonable
I was
price,
gonna ask.
hit me up.
Hey Brandon, did you get the vinyl?
Hit me up if you. I think $35 is plenty reasonable for this album. Hit me up. I'll buy it.
All right, add a 0 to that, and that's probably what the actual market for it is right
And I'll
now.
tell you to go fuck yourself.
All right, so let's get into R&B albums. I knew this was going to be an interesting one for you to revisit, at least going through your notes and your top albums of the year. So I'm very curious. What's your number 5 pick?
Tone Stiff, FWM2.
So the follow up one.
Correct.
Still fuck with me. Yeah,
Yep.
I mean you can count them both as one if you want. I don't really care.
I don't. I count them both as separately because one is better than the other.
Interesting. I see. I think that they're both, I give them both a solid like 6 or 7, but I do think together they really like have probably 7 songs that are album ready. And I feel like the fucking dude, as much as you said you're not picking EPs, like earned a spot EP or not. Like that's how fucking good his just raw talent and voice is. So good pick. My
about
number
you?
5 is Silk Sonic, An Evening with Silk Sonic, which is an album I had in my pop categories for the longest time, but pop just kind of shook out differently. So I ended up putting it here, and I think it works better. It's retro R&B, but it's R&B nonetheless. And I think it's, as a complete album, better than a lot of the other R&B we got this year. So that's why I put it there. What is your number 4?
My number 4 is Tone Stiff, FWM.
So the second one isn't better. Okay, got it.
No, the first one he released, Fuck With Me, that's my number 4. But
Yeah,
Still
and then
Fuck With Me, is
with
number
me was
5.
your number 5.
Yeah.
Okay, and you're counting them as 2 separate ones. I got you.
am.
Okay. No, that's fair. That's fair. And I had them kind of both as like my 6 and 7. So that's interesting that you have them as your 4 and 5. At number 4 for me, I have Her, Back of My Mind. Again, boiled down, this album might be one of the best if you just take the best songs from it, but it is long and it needed some editing and it has a lot of ballads that kind of weigh it down. But despite all that, it is still great and it is still one of the best R&B albums of the year. What's your number 3?
My number 3 is Temporary Highs in the Violet Skies, Snow Allegra.
How is that not your number 1? Okay. Okay, so we've talked about it at length. I'm very curious to hear your top 2 at this point. That is, I feel like, without question, the best R&B album of the year. Maybe one of the best albums of the year altogether. So we'll get into what you thought was better than that. Is there any validation you want to add to that selection right now in that spot?
What's your number 3?
Number 3 for me is Khalid, Scenic Drive, which I'll be very brief about since we haven't reviewed it yet. It is a pop star really embracing his R&B side and collaborating with mostly traditional R&B artists to surprisingly great results. And I'm a big fan of this. A lot of arpeggiated guitar, a lot of really breezy production, a lot of great vocal runs. Awesome album.
Yeah, man.
But yeah, since we haven't reviewed that, I won't make you elaborate on anything yet. So what do you got at number 2 above Snow Allegra?
Her, Back of My Mind.
All right. So that's an acceptable choice to put above that.
So here's the deal. This album really challenged me. I knew that this album was really going to be really important to you. And I challenged myself to sit there for the hour and 17 minutes and listen to the whole thing and actively stream of consciousness, take notes. And I think I got like a page and a half of my notebook with my pens that I use. And honestly, man, it's a great fucking song. It's a great fucking album.
Yeah,
there are some ballads that hold it back, but the album that's in there, besides the songs that I might skip that aren't necessarily bad, still make it one of the best albums of the year for me.
I agree. She's one of the best singer-songwriters in any genre right now, so that's not a bad pick. Number 2 for me, no surprise, Gallant, Neptune. I just talked about this pretty at length earlier, and it's a fucking surprisingly great album. I understand that it's not going to hit everyone the same way that it hits me, but I'm a huge fan of his, and as a huge fan, I had big expectations for this, and it met all of those. So easy number 2 pick for me.
Cool.
All
man.
right. So I'm pretty sure Summer Walker's your number 1. I'm just kidding. What is your number 1 album of the year?
For R&B, Silk Sonic, An Evening with Silk Sonic.
Okay. I should have seen that coming. I don't know why I didn't. All right. So I'm glad you went the same thought process as I did. So you're, despite embracing modern R&B more this year and learning more about it, when the retro shit's done well, you just can't deny it, huh?
Well, I mean, you can't really blame me, buddy. I'm trying here, John.
I mean, hearing Bruno Mars sing "This Bitch Got Me" is just worth this album alone.
Exactly.
So good. Yeah, obviously it's in both of our top 5s for a reason. I think it didn't make my top 10, but just barely. That's probably like number 11 for me. But yeah, number 1 for me in R&B, no surprise, Snow Allegra, Temporary Highs in the Violet Skies. I think it's one of the best R&B albums of the year, of the decade so far, and we'll see it 8 years if it'll be one of the best R&B albums of the decade. But it's off to a good start.
It's a good album. She did well.
Yes, and I really hope she wins the Grammy for it because I think she deserves it. All right, buddy, you ready for probably your most grueling category of the entire thing, and that's your top 5 rock albums?
Yep, I'm ready. Let's get into it.
Number 5.
My number 5 is a little album called The Golden Casket by Modest Mouse.
Interesting. So this one kind of grew on you a little bit, right?
I liked it the second it came out. I actually sat down with my wife. We listened. I printed out the lyrics. We listened to it song by song. We dissected it. We have listened to it together multiple times. I've listened to it alone multiple times. It is just, it's just Modest Mouse, I guess. What else can you say? Great album. Whether you put them in indie rock or Western rock or whatever the fuck you want to call it, it is real good.
It is rock. And I think it's a good pick for that. My number 5 is also kind of an indie pick, and that's Snail Mail Valentine.
All right.
Yeah, I wasn't really anticipating to like this one so much, but
it's a good
I
album.
find myself going back to it, and just like the rawness in her voice on this album is palpable, to say the least. I'm a big fan of it, and I'm excited to actually listen to it more.
In the rock world, this album was in the top 10 for me, which is also surprising for me.
Yeah, I mean, I think that those are the elements that work best of the album, are the rockier moments. And yeah, I think we're on the same page.
I think it kind of straddles that line a little bit.
Yeah, totally. And it has even a little bit of pop to it at times. All right, what's your number 4?
Idols, Crawler.
Ooh, that's a good one. See, I had that one at my number 6. You want to talk about it a little bit?
I mean, what else is there to say that we didn't say on our last podcast talking about it? But it is very quickly it's a dark, brooding, beautiful, celebratory masterpiece of a rock album. Like, there's nowhere else to put it. They've sat in this and you're gonna hate this, they've sat in the post-punk era of music for a while, and this doesn't fall in that. This is just, it's a masterpiece. Thank you, Kenny Beats. Thank you, Idols. Thank you, Joe Talbot.
Yes, the Kenny Beats produced album. I forgot about that.
How could you, man? It's funny. The more you listen to it, go back and listen to it, you'll hear the Kenny Beats in it, man. You'll hear it.
Oh, no, I do. I did from the second I heard the first single, The Beachland Ballroom. Like, I could hear a different aspect from the band that you showed me originally. And it's, like I said, I don't know a lot of Idols music yet, but to me, that's one of their best albums so far. But that's, again, with a limited frame of reference.
It's a good one. I think Joy as an Act of Resistance will forever be my favorite Idols album, but they're all good, man. They're all good. But this is definitely my number 4 for the year. What's yours?
My number 4 is one that I feel like, honestly, might be my number 1 if I just give it a few more listens, and that's Paranol, To See the Next Part of the Dream.
It's so good, man. It was my number. It was my number like 8 or something like that. But it's very good,
dude. I'm blown away by this. I hear so much like Midwest emo in it when I listen to it now, and I don't know what he's saying ever, but I love it.
It's very good, man.
South Korean shoegaze. Who'd have thought?
Right. It's really good music, man.
What do you got at number 3?
And that's the To See the Next Part of the Dream, right?
Yes.
Yeah,
that's the next part of the dream.
Number 3 is Manchester Orchestra, The Million Masks of God.
Ooh. So I should have seen that coming from your pick earlier. And I'm kind of interested in how it seems like you picked a little more of like the indie or rock ones over the heavier metal ones. It's kind of interesting to see how that won out with you. Although I'm sure there's still a few picks to go, but
we've got 2 more picks. But
yes.
But look, man, these, again, that's why we need to separate rock and metal. I think there's a line, and I think many bands cross that metal line. Whatever you want to categorize metal after that is irrelevant. But I think next year we should separate. We'll talk about it off air. But
all right.
I'm a fan of rock music, and this year was very rock dominated for me. And whether it was grunge or this indie stuff or the metal, I mean, it was dominated by rock this year. And it was almost like I didn't have enough time to listen to some of the hip hop and the dance and stuff like that, because there was so much good rock that was coming out and so much music that I wanted to keep revisiting. And this was one of those albums that I couldn't stop revisiting. Most mornings nowadays, I wake up and throw this album on.
Interesting.
Yep.
It's like really become a big part of your rotation every day.
Yeah, my wife and I bought the vinyl, so I'll wake my wife up with some coffee in bed while listening to Manchester Orchestra.
That's a hell of a way to start the day, man.
It's a great way to start the day, man, and it's a hell of an album, and yeah, I really enjoyed it. What's your number 3, John?
My number 3 is a great way to start the day too, and that is "Colors 2" by Between the Buried and Me. A a technical masterpiece, and arguably could be any number 1 through 3. I think.
If
This is just
Manchester
kind of where
Orchestra is a cup of coffee, Between the Buried and Me's Colors 2 is probably a bullet in the face. Great way to wake
yes.
up.
Yes. We don't need to spend too much time on it. It's a technical masterpiece. It's brought us back into a band that we fell in love with 15 years ago, and they're still just as good as they were back then, if
Yep.
not better.
Yep.
All right, what do you got at number 2?
My number 2 is a band that only has about 20,000 listeners on Spotify every month. It's an album that I couldn't get out of my car. It's an album that I couldn't stop listening to this year, and that is Wheel. Album is Resident Human. I think it was probably March or April when I told you to listen to this album. And we didn't talk about it much after that, but it has been on repeat. It is currently in the CD player in my car, and I listen to this album at least twice a week. At least twice a week, maybe
just
3
from
times
driving.
a week. Yeah.
That's awesome. I do remember talking about it with you. I did not revisit it for the purposes of this list, so I'm really interested to see at how that ended up so high on yours. But I feel like it's kind of like your bicep pick. Like a lot of what we end up listening to in our free time, just outside of like the podcast or the playlist, ends up being stuff that we don't really expect it to be. And I feel like this is just kind of one of those cases. And it's really like funny that you bring up the amount of listeners they have, because it's like you don't think about that shit at all when you're actually listening to music. And it only seems to come into play when like publications are making their big end of the year things. They're like, oh, can't pick this person because they're not an established enough artist yet, or whatever the bullshit may be.
How
It's
these
cool that
guys
you're giving them love.
are not massive in the Tool community is beyond me, bro. The drummer is incredible. Danny Carey just got arrested. Tool should hire this fucking guy. Like, I'm just kidding. He's probably not that good. But I will say that this album it's everything I was looking for in this kind of prog, rocky, metal-ish, more metal than rock, but kind of not as metal as something else. It kind of fits in this weird, in this weird kind of dimension of rock music, and it is heavy in all the right ways, soft in all the right ways, pretty in all the right ways, technical in all the right ways, and it's very, very good. I highly recommend, John, that you go back and revisit this album.
I will.
Front to back, and tell me what you think, because I'm curious.
I definitely will.
You know that I'm a sucker for an 11-minute opener, so.
Oh yeah, you love some proggy ass metal.
What you got for number 2 in rock?
One that's gonna piss you off. I got King Cruel, You Heat Me Up, You Cool Me Down. It's a live album, but if we're talking rock and we're talking things we go back to the most, this is up there, man. I don't tend to like a lot of rock music. You know that. And so I feel like the artists that I do tend to like, whether it's the modern ones like King Cruel, Alan Raymond, Klangstoff, or like the long time stays like Arctic Monkeys or Radiohead, I find myself absorbing any content that the few artists I really love in the genre release and just revisiting that over and over. And that's how things like this end up so high on my list. Like Between the Buried and Me, Colors 2 is a better album than this in every way, shape, and form. But I just go back to this one a whole lot more. The low sax in a lot of this performance is just such a beautiful layer. I think his sound, like you said, when you see and hear him live, it's what makes you a fan. And I think that's what made this live album so special and necessary.
I am not mad at you that choice at all, John. It was a good album. It made me a fan of King Cruel, and maybe I'll revisit it again very soon.
You should. You should. Don't try and get the vinyl though. It's fucking expensive. All right, buddy. What's your number one of the year?
You know my number one.
I know. It's between the Buried and Me colors too. Yes, I know. And I had it as my number one, but I felt like it would be fun to mix it up.
It's not. No, man. It's just a perfect album, front to back. Beautiful, pretty, technical. We can't say more about it that we've already said. I will forever come back to this album. It is top tier music. Full stop.
You want to take a guess at to what my number one is?
I have no fucking clue at this point, man. I really don't.
Really?
Yeah.
It's another one that I thought should have been nominated for a Grammy, and that's Every Time I Die, Radical.
Oh,
dude.
yeah.
Oh, my God.
I should have guessed that one.
Yeah, no album.
It's my number 6.
Just this much fucking aggression, anger, metal. This is just beautiful. I fucking love this album. Perfect front to back, and possibly the last Keith Buckley album we'll get with Every Time I Die. So, hell of a note to go out on, as sad as that is.
Right.
But that is what it is. So let's do our final little list here. We won't really elaborate on these since we've talked about all of them now, but what's your number 10 album of the year?
Modest Mouse, Golden Casket.
Mine is Magdalena Bay, Mercurial World. What's your number 9?
Gojira, Fortitude.
Mine is Vince Staples by Vince Staples. Stream Vince Staples, people. What's your number 8?
Idols, Crawler.
Ooh, mine is Jungle, Loving in Stereo. Interesting. Okay, what's your number 7?
My number 7 is going to surprise you. Boys Noise, Polarity.
Yeah, that's very surprising. So is that higher on your top 10 than other? I guess we'll find out shortly. My number 7 is the Maria's Cinema.
All right. My number 6 is Flight Facilities Forever.
That is interesting because that is also my number 6.
Hey.
What's your number 5?
Wheel, Resident Human.
Mine is Nas King's Disease 2. What's your number 4?
Manchester Orchestra, The Million Masks of God.
Damn, that one made the top 4 for you. Okay, Maxo Cream. No, Weight of the World is my number 4. What's your number 3?
Nas King Disease 2.
Wow. Okay. My number 3, Porter Robinson Nurture. What's your number 2?
Bicep Isles.
Okay. I wasn't anticipating that one to be so high up, but I figured it'd be in your top 10. My number 2 is Snow Allegra, Temporary Highs in the Violet Skies. And I'm guessing your album of the year is Between the Buried and Me. Am I right?
You are correct. What is yours, sir?
Tyler, the Creator. Call me if you get lost. I am Pitchfork. So, yeah, see. This is where I thought it'd be interesting. I think mine shook out to 1, 2, 3, 4 hip hop artists, 1 R&B, 1. I think it shook out to about 2 pop artists, 1 R&B, about 4 or 5 hip hop, and 3 electronic. It was an interesting year. No rock for me cracked my top 10, but I don't think it's for lack of love. I just feel like it's a wealth of other things that I love just a little bit more. Your list is kind of the complete opposite, but very much of the same train of thought.
Yeah, it's funny, man. We spent all year basically listening to the same music, and we got different things out of it, and that is beautiful. So I wanted to throw some honorable mentions out there before we end the show, John.
Do it.
Every Time I Die, Radical.
Yes.
Mastodon, Hushed and Grim.
Yes.
Something you may have forgotten about, Group Love, Deadline.
I did not forget about it. I was considering it for pop and rock.
So good.
Fantastic album.
San Holo, BB, Are You Okay?
Good album.
Garbage, No Gods, No Masters.
Oh, man. I forgot about that one. Thanks for bringing that one back.
Fear Factory, Aggression Continuum.
Yep.
Ginger, Wallflowers.
Yep.
Zoo, Dreamland 2021.
Yeah, good comeback by Zoo. Comeback, maybe comeback of the year.
His sandals went on sale this year. Gaspard All Gay, Escapades.
Oh, okay.
Quicksand, Distant Populations.
I remember that one now.
Chevelle Niratias.
This one was in my top 10 for rock. It was like 8, but
Yep.
great album, just tough year.
Delving Hirschbrunnen.
That was that mostly instrumental one,
Yep.
correct?
Yep.
Yeah, okay.
And Bad Bad Not Good Talk Memory.
Oh my God, that's a fantastic album. If we have a jazz category next year, which we might add, hopefully we're talking about them that time as well.
You
I
know,
don't think I have any honorable mentions that you didn't cover. Maybe Bo Burnham we talked about
talked about
earlier.
Paranol.
Yeah, Paranol, which is goddamn okay. I guess we could throw a little shout out to J. Cole and Isaiah Rashad. They put out pretty good albums, just not on the level that they impacted our end of year lists. Mick Jenkins, Elephant in the Room, fantastic album. Rez Spiral, SG Lewis Times. We talked about all these albums, but 21 Pilots, Scaled and Icy, that's an album that deserves a little bit of love, I think. And Terrace Martin Drones. There was a lot of like really interesting releases this year that definitely top 50 material, but not quite top 10 this year.
Yeah, man, there was a lot of good music this year, so I'm excited to hear what 2022 has to offer us, and I think that this was good.
Yeah, this was fun. We will be doing our season finale. I believe the 27th is when we're recording. So if you're listening to this, look out for that before the new year. And next year, hopefully, there's a lot of exciting news with the podcast and the playlist and all of that. And we'll catch you all then.
Alrighty, thanks, John. Have a great night, everybody.
Peace.
Peace.